and welcome to Caltech. My name is Claudia Bonspector. I'm the curator of this exhibition. And this is, of course, Lita Albuquerque, who, and I have to make a full confession before we even go forward. I've been hunkering to do an exhibition with her for quite some time, and this was the opportunity that I finally was able to snag her for a contribution. So again, thank you for indulging me, indulging Caltech. And so we're excited to have you participate. In fact, first before we launch into our conversation, I have to apologize. We're not quite ready yet to show the exhibition itself. We have a lot up on the wall, including actually a work by Lita, who's just getting out of her jacket there. You have to come back for the opening to see it because the cases are still empty, the lighting's not set, and blah, 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 no security, nothing. So you'll have to unfortunately come back, but at least we give you and Shana Mabari. You've seen Shana Mabari's work. Those are the colorful cylindrical sculptures you saw when you walked in, depending on where you came from. So she's here. Thank you, Shana. So Lita was actually the first person I invited to be part of this exhibition. The exhibition is really, just to give you the briefest of overviews, it's called Crossing Over Art and Science at Caltech, 1920 to 2020. And it looks at 100 years worth of Caltech history and Caltech's history, the history of Caltech's involvement with the arts. And the exhibition comes out of the Library and Special Collections archives. So we wanted to showcase a lot of the materials that are in the archives, but I also wanted to make sure that we have a lot of contemporary art in there. So she was the first person I asked, and the reason I asked, other than wanting to do an exhibition with Lita, was that she was actually your very first exhibition ever took place at Caltech, which is surprising. I was surprised by it.
50 years ago.
Exactly 50 years. It happened in April 1974. So it was 50 years ago. It was that moment in time, as opposed to this moment in time, which is the. So I felt like fantastic, and of course Caltech, as many of you know, was an all-male institution back then, still pretty much. In 1970, I think women started to be admitted as undergraduate students. So to have a lot of women participate in this exhibition was important to me. And so I called Lita, and here she is. And so I want to kind of start our conversation a little bit with that moment in time in 1974.
Wow.
Okay, so you were young, 20-something, whatever, never exhibited before, and so you're coming to Caltech. What was that like?
Well, first of all, it was an amazing exhibition. It was at the Baxter Art Hall, which was art gallery, which was a gallery run by David Smith, who was this really wonderful curator. And it was called CA 90291, which is the zip code for Venice, California. And I had lived in Venice, but I no longer lived in Venice. I was in Malibu. And a dear friend of mine, Sally Shapiro, who was the curator, was looking at all these artists from Venice, and I think she became a friend afterwards. Actually, I didn't know her. And all those artists said, you've got to see Lita's work, you've got to see Lita's work. So she finally came to Malibu, and even though I was no longer CO 90291, included me in the show. And she included me in a show. It was so wonderful because it's called, my work was called Earth Drawings. And they were all about the earth and about mark making, but mark making about the earth. So I've always had this interest of what's below us, and then as my work developed, it was also what's above us. So I feel very much like a space traveler, both in space and time. And I've done a lot of narratives. At that time, it was mainly the drawings. And I was so young that someone, a very, very well-known collector, wanted to buy the whole thing. And I was so young.
Smart man. I'm assuming it was a man.
It was a man. But I didn't even register. So it was great to be at Caltech. At that time, I don't know how much I really was thinking about science. Science for me is this interplay of art and science that has come out of the development of the work. Since then, as I said earlier, this is my 6th show at Caltech, and I've collaborated with astrophysicists from here, and really feel very embedded, that the work is very embedded in science and in the arts. And also, there was I did a show, an installation, actually, maybe I don't know where I left it. It's a public artwork for the state of California in the state capitol. And we called it As Above, So Below, Art as Political and Cosmological Space. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I did a lot of research on it, as there was a lot of text in what I did in layered silk screen on layered glass that were fountains. And I had to do a lot of research on the state of California, which included, of course, what was the main thing about California, which is the space industry, right? And the gold rush. Those two things were a main thing with me, and that's when I found out about the nucleosynthesis theory and what happened here, of Einstein being here. I read a lot about what was going on at Caltech in the 40s with Einstein and Hubble. So
Einstein was here in the 30s.
In the 30s.
1931,
That's right.
I think he came. It was really early.
Yeah. So it's so that's.
So tell us a little bit about this interest in science. I have many questions, but maybe you could tell us where that interest, because as an artist you can go off in a number of different directions. Why science?
Well, I don't think of it as science, I think of it as the human. In Robert Irwin's words, it's like art is an inquiry, and the idea of the way I see it is the inquiry is what drives you. And imagine plowing the earth, and you're plowing the earth, right? That's the inquiry, and what falls there for me is the art. So the interest, the beginning thing is the inquiry. And for me, it had a lot to do with personal things. I came to this country from North Africa when I was 11. It was a big change. I felt I was completely uprooted. So the work really was about trying to locate myself. And I was very lucky to live in this artist colony where I could see the curve. It was in Malibu overlooking the ocean. I could see the curvature of the earth. It was facing due south. I could see the sun seemingly move from east to west, the moon move from east to west. I really became interested in nature and in the relationship of my own body to nature. So it was really through this personal need to find out, where do I belong? And then of course it became much more, once you get to that kind of personal, it becomes cosmic,
Right.
It becomes who we are as a human being.
Well, I've always looked at your work, not so much engaging science, but engaging nature.
Yes.
And with a certain strong spiritual impetus.
Yes.
Right? So when people describe, she does all this work with science, I always feel like yes and no, or no and yes.
Yeah.
So, and it reminds me also of one of the things that when you curate an exhibition like that, people always say, so what's the difference between art and science and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, it's the inquiry. It's the curiosity that scientists want to know, artists want to know. They go about it in different ways, but it's this drive to understand and to locate. So I think it's very interesting that was like this for you as well.
Yeah, well, Leonardo da Vinci said that the greatest painter of them all is the sun, right? And I was very lucky to live on this property where I could really observe sunlight. Gold for me comes from having seen, I started using gold when I saw, of course, the reflection of the sun on the ocean. We lived right on a bluff overlooking the ocean. So it was really about...
In Tunisia, that was?
No, here. In Tunisia, it was the same thing.
Same, yeah.
The boarding school that I was in, this Catholic convent, was in a place near Carthage. The Mediterranean was right below me. The earth was palpable. I would go to the Roman ruins because Carthage was the site of a great Roman civilization, and I could feel the earth. I could see the ocean and the blue of the ocean. And we lived near a town called Sidi Bou Said, which is a famous town that was founded by Sufi in the 11th century. And in the 19th century, this Frenchman decided to make it a blue town. So he painted all the windows and all the doors blue. And it's incredible. Everybody loves it. Everybody goes there, whether they're Tunisian or tourists. They go there, and I go there quite frequently now. So it was, and I was also a boarder in the school, so I was away from my parents. And so all I had to rely on was the earth below me, the sea, and Catholicism, which was Renaissance paintings, blue, gold, and red. So that combination. But nature always meant a lot to me. I love going barefoot, and it's always been, so when I left, it was traumatic, and we drove across the country, and our mother, my brother's sitting right here, which is wonderful. It was my mother, my brother, and I. And we drove across the country, and then she took us, we were actually born here, so she took us to the Pacific Ocean and said, here, this is where you were born. And I have a painting in a show right now at the Cone Gallery. The show's name is Earth's Skin, but there's a painting with that title. And so it's all, it's all this, this child kind of looking for connection, looking for, I don't know about meaning, more connection and understanding, but it's all the natural world. And then my life after that, I really made a point of always making sure that I was in nature. And in fact, just today, I was at the beach in Santa Monica at the Annenberg House, and the ocean was so beautiful. It was so green and the light. And so I make sure that I feed myself, right, that I get nourished by nature on a daily level. It's very, very important to me. And I write about it, and I do these energetic meditations that have just come to me while I was running on the beach in 1993. So it's the whole.
But then you also seem to have, I think, a special interest in space.
Yes.
Right? So it's
Yes.
not just nature on
Yes.
Earth, it's all the stuff that's out
Yes.
there. Where do you
That
trace
came,
that?
well, a few things. Number one, the Virgin Mary and her cloak with the stars, right?
That is so interesting, that the blue, because I was
Yeah.
gonna ask you about your colors, but anyway, keep going.
So there was a little grotto in my school that whenever I would get reprimanded, it was down the hill, I would run to it and sit in front of this beautiful woman, with her cloak and the stars. And it would be a way of just dreaming, really. So that's one. In Tunisia, in our mother's house, we lived on the beach as well. We had this half moon kind of veranda, and the stars at night would go all the way to the horizon. So it was really this kind of impact. But also the Mediterranean has the ancient culture. The Mediterranean is about astronomy. It's about the stars. So that's one element. The other element was the work itself. I started going out in the desert, and the work was about either a relationship to the horizon line or to the setting sun or the moon. And then as I was on these flat lake beds in the desert, it started to go about the stars. I just started thinking about that. And so then it was an obsession. I thought of stars as musical notes. I was always interested in what kind of music is if you really could do a score to the intervals between stars. I wrote a lot about that. So it's always, I've also made a point of keeping an internal space, and it's so hard in our culture, right? And I made a point of making sure I could have that kind of space in order to be able to hear in the interior.
Yeah. So, this is great. How does this translate then into your particular formal language, right? I mean, when I think of Lita Albuquerque's work, I see piles of pigment, materials strewn on the floor. I mean, there are different ways an interest like that can translate into this kind of minimalist. Were there other artists that were